reason the process is to protect your body from being affected by cold. Similarly, in this age, Kali Yuga, it is recommended that God realization is only possible by this chanting of Hare Krishna. So Prabhupada knew, Lord Chaitanya knew, that there are so many people, only human beings, infinite. It's a bigger number of fallen souls than anyone can imagine. And even among the human beings, even at the time of Prabhupada on this planet, there were still 3 or 4 billion human beings. Now there are twice as many, but 3 or 4 billion is a lot of human beings. And Prabhupada's ambition was to save all the human beings, at least all the human beings, and as many of the animals and plants as possible, but at least all the human beings. And to do that, a movement is necessary. There has to be a huge movement, a huge organization. So it was one example of someone challenging Prabhupada that, oh, I like the ISKCON movement, but I don't like, but I think the organization is getting in the way. After a year or two, ISKCON started becoming more and more organized and progressively a little bit hierarchical. And Prabhupada's response was that it must be highly organized. There has to be organization. Any big ambition, a big business or a big country or a big anything, it requires organization, it requires management, it requires a movement, because the ambition is so great. The ambition is to save everyone. That requires a movement. So there were challenges like this. Even this is only 1968, but already people were raising the same challenge. But the movement might get in the way of serving Krishna. And Prabhupada's response was, the movement is service to Krishna, because we have understood what Krishna wants. We are preaching the same thing. Anyway, so it's our responsibility as disciples and grand disciples of Prabhupada and great disciples, and in the future, so many generations to come. It's our responsibility to keep the movement pure, to follow purely, and to be humble, obedient servants in the ISKCON society, to serve our authority, to serve our spiritual master, in order to keep the movement very simple and very pure. And so, and that's why it'll be effective. We lose the purity or lose the focus of what ISKCON is. There's only one purpose. If we lose that focus, then the potency can be lost. So Prabhupada always emphasized strict following of the principles, chanting japa, 16 rounds, and for initiated disciples and those who hope to become initiated. But even anyone, just to chant japa is a wonderful thing. 16 rounds or 8 rounds or 2 rounds or 5 minutes. Any chanting of japa is a wonderful thing. But the main thing, we have to keep the purity of ISKCON by keeping ourselves pure and humble, obedient servants in the Krishna consciousness mission, the movement. And Prabhupada says here that Yeah, there's nothing new. Don't try to see something new. It is the oldest system because God is the oldest. You are also the oldest, and your relationship is also the oldest. Therefore, the movement is also the oldest. But the process adopted is suitable for this time. So you may think, I'm only 20 years old. How can I be the oldest? But this is only one life, one material life. But the spirit souls are eternally existing with Krishna. As Prabhupada says in the introduction to the Chaitanya Charitamrita, in the talking about the advent of Lord Chaitanya in as the combined manifestation of Radha and Krishna, and he says there's no possibility of tracing out a time in history when Krishna divided himself into two, into Radha Krishna. There's no point in history when you can say that they combined again in the form of Lord Chaitanya, but we have to talk like that. We speak like that. So it's also the same. There's no time that you can point to in like historical uh, uh, train of events that Krishna created us. You can't point, but we're, for all intents and purposes, or actually, we are eternally existing along with Krishna as his parts and parcels. There was never a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. So Krishna is the oldest, and we're also the oldest. And our relationship with Krishna is also the oldest, means eternal. It didn't have a beginning, and it certainly will never have an end. It's just basic points that we should remember. So I'll keep reading a little more. Many of the youngsters would try to catch Prabhupada in contradictions. One boy noted Prabhupada's statement that it was natural for a child to drink milk and not eat the meat of an animal. The boy argued that if Prabhupada's emphasis was on being natural, then is it natural for a child to grow up, shave his head, and serve God? Or was that just another form of socialization? Well, it's like a silly argument. It's like, really, it's a childish argument. You say that it's not natural, that it's natural for a child to drink milk and not eat meat. But isn't it unnatural to shave your head and wear a dhoti and sari and tilak? Isn't that unnatural? It's a childish thing to say. But when it comes to arguing against the necessity of surrendering to Krishna, people will come up with the most silly, childish arguments that you can imagine. Even the most intelligent sounding arguments, impersonalist argument, they can sound so educated, or the scientists, material scientists, they think they know so much and they're making such good, logical, so-called scientific arguments. And we're not scientific. We're just sentimental who believe in some far off persons. They think we're just sentimental fools, but we're right and they're wrong. But the arguments against surrendering to God and ultimately are all just silly, childish, foolish arguments. There's no good argument for not surrendering to God. There's no intelligent argument. for it. But because people want, I'll read a little more. Isn't this just another form of socialization? Another challenger asked why the International Society for Krishna Consciousness was incorporated. Incorporation is like a dirty word to some people. Definitely, certainly in the hippie society at the time, like corporation, incorporated. That was like, oh, then it must be something, something bad, something not, yeah. Another asked if the sadhus in India who wore long hair and wandered in the woods needed spiritual masters. The questions revealed the guests' uneasiness. Prabhupada was demanding a full commitment to the truth. They could understand that if they accepted that he was presenting the truth, then they too, like the bright-faced disciples sitting beside them in the crowded temple room, they should bow down to Prabhupada and Lord Jagannath, join the movement, shave their heads, and go out chanting Hare Krishna. At least that was the implication. So Prabhupada didn't say that in his lectures. He didn't say that then you should all shave your heads and wear beads and tilak and wear dhotis. And he didn't say that, but the people coming, they could understand. Well, if I accept what you're saying as the absolute truth, so the logical implications of that are that I should do what your disciples are doing. It's like, and it does follow very logically. And that's why I joined the movement. That's why all the devotees came and joined the movement and did what all the devotees in the temple were doing, because it was inescapable logic. That's what you do. Of course, nowadays, in the beginning, if you joined, it basically meant you moved in the temple. Nowadays, most people don't move in the temple, but they live very strict, committed to lives of devotional service within ISKCON, in their apartments, in their homes, and they're going to work or going to school. But in the beginning, mostly all the devotees, when they became serious, they moved in the temple. That's what you did. And but of course, time has things have changed in a lot of ways, but none of the basic principles have changed. It's still a surrender of the independence to a great degree to accept a bona fide spiritual master and accept Krishna as a supreme personality of God. It still requires ultimate commitment and surrender. That can never change. But anyway, so the people who come, they understand what's actually being asked of them, so they try to come up with an argument. Okay, well, maybe if I can find some fault in the logic or some discrepancy in the philosophy, that means I can reject the whole thing. Because, oh, you said this here and you said that there, and that doesn't follow logically, and this and this and this and this. They're looking for some way to get out of the idea of surrender. They can find some apparent discrepancy. So those who, at least that was the implication. So those who deeply wanted to avoid the austerity, the surrender, the uprooting of a whole lifetime of illusion, sought out the flaws the possible contradictions. But kind and lenient though he was, Prabhupada, never demanding that they shave their heads or live in the temple, continued to defeat their doubting arguments, expose the weakness of their atheistic reasoning, and smash the folly of their material desires. He ruled forth as Krishna's representative, speaking from the blue and gold velvet Vyasasan in the room of the Seattle house. So the change is a complete change. Everything that we learned in our childhood and growing up, everything is turned upside down on its head. Unless you grew up in a Vaishnava family, which some of you probably did. I didn't. And so coming to Krishna consciousness, like everything I ever thought was true and rational and right and logical, everything I understood was turned completely upside down, just not valid anymore. I had to leave it all behind. Krishna consciousness is the most radical thing there is. The devotees are the ultimate radicals in society. We're the ultimate rebels. The hippies thought they were rebels in the 60s. They were going against all the social norms. I were a little bit, not really very much, but that was their idea. We'll go against all the social norms and found a new life, a new way of living. Get back to nature and live a simple life and on and they had some ideas like that, but they're being rebels against the social norms in society are nothing compared to the rebelliousness of the devotees. We're completely in opposition, at least philosophically and practically in opposition to all the social norms. We go along to get along. We go to school, we get jobs, do all these things, but we know that it's not the real purpose of life. Sense gratification is certainly not the purpose of life. We do what we have to do to get along in the world, but we're actually rebellious against everything. Okay, so let's see. All right, and this is a woman speaking. I wish to see proofs of afterlife in writing so that I can read it and study it and examine it carefully. Is it available in writing? Read Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada said. You'll understand everything. And Krishna says in writing in the Bhagavad Gita, just as the embodied soul passes in this life from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes at the time of death. Its self-realized soul is not bewildered by such a change. It's there in writing by God, and that should be good enough. God wrote it. That should be good enough. But and even there are well-documented cases, certainly in India, like reliably documented cases of people who definitely remember at least one past life. You've probably read some of those cases. I know when I was a kid, like 12 years old, I used to buy Superman comic books every week when they And on the inside cover of them was like an unusual thing before the comic book started. And there was one example of an unusual thing that somebody heard of, and it was well documented, of this little girl in India who she's like 8 or 9 years old, 7, 8, 9, and she was always telling her parents to bring her to this village that was like 30 miles from where she was born and her parents lived. And so they ultimately gave in and they brought her to this village. And this little girl led them to this one particular house. And they knocked on the door, and a young lady, opened the door and invited them in. And the little girl recognized her as her daughter from her previous life. And she treated her as her daughter. And she knew so many things about the house and about the neighborhood that nobody could have known who didn't live there. So I think it's definitely a well documented case. So there are instances of that. Generally, you don't remember your past life. That's not Krishna's arrangement. It's his arrangement in almost all cases that you don't remember your past life. So, but this lady is like, well, I want to see the proof of afterlife in writing so that I can read it and study it and examine it carefully. Is it available in writing? And Prabhupada said, read Bhagavad Gita. You'll understand everything. And the woman says, that's 68 volumes? Prabhupada, no, Bhagavad Gita is one volume only. 18 chapters, 700 verses. You can read it in 3 days. It is not very difficult. We have published Bhagavad Gita as it is, and I think if you read it, you will get so many nice informations. After reading Bhagavad Gita, you read Srimad. Then you get further enlightenment. Then you read teachings of Lord Chaitanya. The Chaitanya Charitamrita wasn't out back then, but teachings, either was most of the Srimad Bhagavatam, but the teachings of Lord Chaitanya was published in 1968, and that's directly from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Then you read teachings of Lord Chaitanya, and you get further enlightenment. And for general information, we have this Back to Godhead you can read. It is not that simply we are talking, we are backed by sufficient knowledge and literature. So it went into the evening. 9 o'clock turned to 10 o'clock and 10 o'clock to 10:30. Is bhakti yoga for everyone? What about Kundalini yoga? Why did Krishna ask Arjuna to fight? What about Christ consciousness? What about the Trinity? Prabhupada was completely absorbed in defeating arguments and answering questions about Krishna, a samadhi of debate on behalf of his Lord Krishna. And Prabhupada refers to it as samadhi. And it is samadhi to be absorbed in preaching, is samadhi to go to the kitchen and wash pots for Krishna. If you get absorbed in it, you're in samadhi. You're working using all your bodily efforts and all your mental efforts to serve Krishna. And that's the essence of samadhi. Prabhupada often referred to the book distributors as being in samadhi because they were out all day long in the parking lots or on the streets, approaching one person after another for only one purpose, to give them knowledge of Krishna. So Prabhupada often said they're in samadhi. Well, people have an idea of samadhi. You have to be sitting in a perfect lotus position and your eyes half closed and can't be affected by any sound. That may be samadhi. There are some people who can go in samadhi meditating on Krishna like that. But any practical service in Krishna consciousness is samadhi, is complete absorption, single-minded attention on one point uh, on Krishna, and that is samadhi. The assembled, no wait. So here is the offering, Prabhupada said. Take Krishna consciousness. Now it is your choice. If you take it, it is good. If you don't take it, that is your misfortune. Is there any difficulty to accept our formula? I ask all of you, is there any difficulty? I am asking this. You have asked me so many questions. Is there any difficulty to accept this formula? The assembled guests and devotees murmured in reply, no. So why don't you take it? Prabhupada laughed. It is so simple, nice. Try to understand by your knowledge. We are not pushing forcibly. You have got your intelligence, argument, logic, everything, but you'll find it sublime. The author of Chaitanya Charitamrita says that we are placing it for your judgment, not that we are pushing it by force. Sometimes it is said that the Mohammedans propagated their religion by holding a sword in one hand and the Quran in another hand. Either you accept Quran or there is sword for you. Krishna consciousness is not like that. It is placed for your judgment. And if you like, you can accept. Otherwise, I came here empty-handed. I shall go back empty-handed. There is no loss, no gain. So Prabhupada preached very directly, and he wasn't averse, or he didn't. He would sometimes put people on the spot. Like I'm telling you, the process, and it's very easy. There's nothing difficult about Krishna consciousness. The only difficulty is our reluctance to surrender. But the process of Krishna consciousness, there's nothing difficult. It's all very simple, very easy to perform. So I'm telling you, the process, it's very easy. So why don't you take it? Take it. And I'm putting it for your judgment. If you like, you can accept. But Prabhupada would put people on the spot. They'd be listening to him, and then Prabhupada would challenge them. There's one video you can see in one of the series of videos that came out in the 70s. There's a few videos called the Acharya parts, and there's, I think, 4 parts to it. And it was Prabhupada in various places, temples in the society. And one of them was in Los Angeles. And he's sitting in the garden at the temple, and a beautiful sunny day in California. And there were several middle-aged men sitting with him, like, I don't know, 6 or 8 men, and they were all some kind of minister or official in one or the other of the Protestant denomination churches, or there might, yeah, and they were like respectable preachers in their whatever denomination of the Protestant church they were from. They were all middle-aged or elderly gentlemen, and Prabhupada was preaching to them, and of course I'm sure to a great extent their attitude towards Prabhupada was a good degree of, well, I'm a respected preacher of God consciousness, and here's another preacher of God consciousness from a different path, or he's a Hindu preacher. So he'll respect me as a preacher, and I'll respect him. I'll listen to him talk, and I'll ask questions. And so I'm sure that was their attitude toward Prabhupada. But Prabhupada's attitude towards them, as with all the fallen souls, they may be, they're obviously interested in God by their commitment, by their life's dedication. They're also interested in God, but they don't know much about God. They don't have very much understanding or realization of God, certainly no information or understanding of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Prabhupada's attitude towards them, as with everyone, was I have to instruct these people. They're also in the darkness of ignorance, of illusion. Anyway, he was going back and forth with them, and they were asking him questions, and Prabhupada was answering them. And at one point, Prabhupada challenged them. He said, "You're all interested in God. Obviously, you're all ministers. You're all interested in God." And they're all like, yes, 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 we're interested. And Prabhupada said, "So do you know who God is?" And they said, "No, we don't know who God is." So Prabhupada said, "And I say Krishna is God. Take it." So ultimately, it comes down to that. The pure devotee can give logic, can give reason, can quote Shastras, can knock himself out, preach himself till he's dead on his feet, tired. But ultimately, the person has to come around to the point that I say Krishna is God, take it. And it's really as simple as that. No one is forced to accept Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but that's what Krishna wants. And if we accept, then it's good for us. And if we don't accept, then Prabhupada said that's our misfortune. Okay. I'll read a little more. Prabhupada laughed with the satisfaction of the completely surrendered servant. Then he asked them all to chant Hare Krishna. And this is Tamal Krishna Maharaj speaking. At this point, he wasn't a sannyasi. He was a young married man, I think married, maybe not yet. But Tamal Krishna speaking. At that point, I could recognize that Prabhupada was my complete Lord and Master. Whenever he would get up from the Vyasasana, I don't think I would recommend this, but he did it. He said, whenever he would get up from the Vyasasana, I would just grip his feet and hold them and hold them. I would hold his feet at my head, and I wouldn't let him walk at all. So I've never done that, and probably most disciples haven't done that, but he did it, and he is a very great surrendered disciple of Srila Prabhupada. I wouldn't let him walk at all. I was so eager to be at Prabhupada's lotus feet. I wanted to be with him as much as I could. I would feel very torn apart when he would go to another temple. I remember sometimes after the program, he would finish eating a piece of fruit and would throw the peel on the floor. We would all jump for it and fight each other in front of the altar and Prabhupada for the peel, the orange peel or the apple peel or banana peel. We would fight each other for it in front of the altar and Prabhupada. We would be scrapping around like little puppies. Prabhupada would lean back and laugh. He thought we were making very nice advancement by this. Devotees are humble. That's a really, these are adult people. These are 18, 20, 25, maybe 30-year-old men and women. I don't think the women were fighting with the men, but the men were fighting on the floor for the peel. They're grown men, and they're fighting for a banana peel that Prabhupada threw. And Prabhupada liked it. And he thought they were making very nice advancement by this. Let's see. Yeah, read a little more. Oh, there's a television crew that came from the local TV station, and they filmed the devotees dancing and singing and portions of Prabhupada's lecture, and then the next day they came again and they did some more interviewing, film Prabhupada playing the harmonium and singing, and they showed all of Prabhupada's books. And then it was on television that night, and it was really nice. It was favorable, and Prabhupada saw it, and he liked it very much. To TV showing, there was a brief fame. When Prabhupada came to the lecture the next night, the temple room was filled with about 50 extra guests, young men and women. Prabhupada seemed pleased, but actually they were all one group, a fun-seeking fraternity house with their dates. A fraternity house in America is just a social club and mostly just a place for men to live and break all the regulative principles and have. And anyway, there were a bunch of them there from one fraternity decided to go to the temple, not for anything serious, but just as a night out with their girlfriends. And uh, they were all one group. They managed to stay. They stayed through the kirtan, but as soon as Prabhupada began to speak, they all got up and left. 50 people just got up and left. That's a little discouraging when you're giving a lecture and all of a sudden a lot of people get up and leave. But it shouldn't. Of course, Prabhupada wasn't discouraged. He was never, no matter what. But he said, uh, began to speak. They all got up and left, leaving the devotees and the usual number of about a dozen interested guests. The devotees were also going to the university, and among the students was considerable interest, at least casually. A representative of a student newspaper came and talked at length with Prabhupada. Anyway, then a couple of men came and they said they were reporters for a newspaper. So the Prabhupada's secretary let them come in and they asked for an interview, but their interview became an interrogation. They challenged Prabhupada as to why he was not teaching that Jesus Christ was the only way to God. They were angry that Prabhupada was preaching on the campuses when Prabhupada informed them that he accepted Jesus Christ as the Son of God. They demanded, but do you believe or not that Jesus is the only way? That's the Christians, that's always their challenge. Jesus is the only way, and anyone who's following any other thing is not not religious at all. In fact, they're practically worship of the devil. That's their attitude. That's what they think. That's what they believe. Prabhupada replied, do you believe that God is limited or unlimited? Logical question. Unlimited, they admitted. Then why are you limiting him? Said Prabhupada, by saying that there is only one way to get to him. Even an ordinary man can have 20 sons. Do you mean to say that God can have only one son? Why are you limiting him? Within a few minutes, the men were speaking to Prabhupada in loud voices. It became obvious that they were not reporters, and they told them that they were, in fact, local Protestant ministers. When they became blasphemous, the devotees asked them to leave the house. Prabhupada wrote in a letter to a disciple in New York, the priestly class of Christian and Jewish churches are becoming envious of our movement because they are afraid of their own system of religiosity, because they see so many young boys and girls are taking interest in this system of Krishna consciousness. Naturally, they are not very satisfied. So we may be facing some difficulty by them in the future. So we have to take some precaution. Of course, this priestly class could not do anything very nice till now, but the dogmatic way of thinking is going on. So anyway, we shall have to depend on Krishna. Okay, well, I'll stop there. Last time somebody had a question and it was about going to work and how it's hard to keep up your Krishna consciousness when you go to work. And of course, that's a dilemma that so many disciples, very sincere devotees face every day. So most of our congregation are working men and women, and they go to the office or work on their computers at home, or have their own. It is difficult. And I know that anyway, I just went over an answer, went over a few points one by one in a sort of rote manner. And I should have asked if there was any further uh, talk about that particular point, because there's a lot you can say about that. Because it's something that most of the devotees do in this day and age. They go to the office. So it's an important thing. But if there's any more talk about that or any other anything else that I talked about tonight or previously, then can say now.
Prabhu, there is one
Anybody
question
can
in the
say.
chat, Prabhuji.
Yeah.
Prabhuji, there is one question in the chat. It says, what steps we should take so that organizational hierarchy does not become the focus in our Krishna conscious movement and we remain sensitive to devotees.
Yeah, that's a really important question. We just have to remember how important it is. Every devotee is an individual. All the authorities, they were new bhaktas and bhaktians at one point, all the GBCs, all the sannyasis, all the temple presidents were new boys and girls at one point. Everyone has their struggles. Everyone knows so we can't become. We just have to remember how hard it is to surrender to Krishna and go through the the difficulties of living in close and working in close contact with so many other individuals from different walks of life, and we're not getting anything material out of it. We're It's difficult. We're not getting any money out of it. We're not getting any fame or position. He might get some position. He might get some fame as a sannyasi or something, but everyone knows that's not the point of becoming a leader or a sannyasi or temple president. Everyone knows that. It's Krishna consciousness 101. So everyone just has to remain sensitive to eat. Every devotee is a very special person, and treat each other. We just have to remember that and treat each other like that. The Bible and the one of the qualifications of educated man by Chanakya Pandit is that he treats everyone as he would want to be treated. In the Bible, it says, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. Everyone is struggling. Everyone is a suffering, conditioned soul. Everyone is struggling in so many ways. We just have to remember that and just act like that. It's just and and then we can keep Krishna consciousness very ISKCON, very personal and individual. And now there's so many things that can be done practically. Now most of the young devotees are assigned mentors, or there's specific people that they can go to with any problems and personal questions and concerns. So that's a very good thing. We take advantage of that, and yeah, we just we aren't organized. It is operated. It is. There are things that have to be done in an organized institutional way. They can never lose sight of the fact of the importance of every single individual. That's all I can say. It's just you just have to remember. Everyone just has to remember just how important it is, and keep that front and center. There's one disciple. This is one that I really like. One disciple went to Prabhupada, and she had been with him previously as his personal cook, I think. I forgot her name, but she had been used to a few years before having a lot of close contact with Prabhupada. And then she didn't have that position anymore, but she was serving in some temple, some zone, and she was having trouble getting along for whatever reason. She was having trouble getting along with her particular authority and the institution. And she came to India from United States and to talk with Prabhupada personally. about the problem she was having. And so she explained it to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada said a very, really nice, really important thing to her. He said, by this time, it was like in the 70s, and ISKCON was pretty highly developed by then and spread all over the world, many temples, many disciples. So it was big. And Prabhupada said to her, he said, ISKCON is big, but I am small. So you can, it's saying, yeah, okay, yes, you have trouble, but don't worry. You can come to me and talk to me and be comforted by me personally. So everyone can't doesn't have easy access to their spiritual master, but we should have some older, experienced devotees that we do feel comfortable going to and talking to privately. Yeah, that's the best I can do with that topic. Every devotee is important. Every devotee is important. All right, why don't we stop now?
Thank you so much, Prabhu. So let us thank Hg Muktavandya for enlightening us, giving us his wonderful association. We're loudly chanting 3 times. Haribo! 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 Hg Muktavandya Prabhu ki jai! Srila Prabhupada
Jai.
ki jai!
Jai. That's it.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Devotee.